Hey everybody, how's it going tonight? Sorry I'm late. I still have this crappy laptop. Oh, hey Mama 3. Hey Mida. Hey Dad. Hey Country Girl Brenda. Hey Sayla. I put the link in for you, Sayla. Hey Cool Gamer. Sorry, just 1 second. I need a room to do this in because my son has got some of the biggest mouth between him and his friends. Oh my god. So if you hear anybody talking, that's them in the background. Oh, get out of here. So I'm gonna actually go down to, I think it's called Play It Star. They have laptops and stuff there. I'm gonna see how much they are, and either buy one or see if I can get one. I don't know, what do you call it, like layaway, something like that. I can't. This stupid thing is gonna break. It's really really old. Okay, I'm just gonna start. I'm not sure if Sayla's coming up or not. Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right. Where do we end off? Okay. So, on top of everything else that happened to us, that kind of innuendo pained and infuriated me. Then, a year and a half later, when we dropped the suit against Sears, we had to go through it all again, the whole Jimmy Campbell episode and another slew of stories that dragged us through the mud. Why the hell would they drop the suit against Sears? I wouldn't. That's weird to me. Because she kicked that what was it? I don't think it was a security guard. It was like I think I can't remember. She was one of the girls that was working there or something like that. And she ended up kicking all the kids outside. And then Adam got kidnapped, right? Or so they say. So yeah, I would never drop that lawsuit unless it wasn't true. I don't know. It's fishy. Stories that seem to suggest that what had happened to Adam was somehow our fault because Reve and I weren't really the all American family after all. So from experience, I knew full well that the press was capable of, or thought I did. It was that experience that made me suspicious on the morning of January 12th, 1995, when my executive assistant, Sherry Nolan, sent me a fax that had arrived at my Washington office. It came on the letterhead of the Mobile Press Register and was signed by a reporter named Jay Grayland. Dear Mr. Walsh, I'm writing to request an interview with you. I would like to discuss a range of topics, including your life and where you are emotionally and otherwise 14 years after Adam's death. Grayland went on to say that he wanted to discuss the status of Adam's case with me, that he wanted to meet me in person, and that he was willing to travel anywhere that would be most convenient for me. Oh, every time I go on here, I swear I get like a million pop ups. You wonder if they settled the lawsuit? Yeah, I don't know. It just, it says they dropped the suit against Sears, so I don't know. I'm sure your schedule stays full, and I will gratefully take whatever time you can spare, he wrote. If I could watch you at work with our interview squeezed in, that would be great. Something about it just didn't feel right to me. I remember asking Sherry, what do you think this guy really wants? Grayland kept trying to contact me, and I kept ignoring him. On February 21st, he sent a certified letter. My newspaper is committing much in time and resources to this project. Won't you please help us in our effort to help you find Adam's killer? Then on March 24th, he showed up unannounced at the Fox Studios in Washington, where my executive producer, Lance Heflin, told him in no uncertain terms that I was not going to be talking to him. On the morning of Sunday, May 7th, 1995, my instincts were proved correct. That's when the first of a three-part series of tabloid-style articles sent to us by a congressman friend in Alabama appeared in the Mobile Press Register. Under the screaming headline, Adam Walsh, Myth and Mystery. Oh boy. I didn't know about that. Grayland, the sole reporter for the series, wrote that he had taken a special interest in this case ever since, as a copy editor 14 years before in Baton Rouge. He had written some headlines for Adam's story. I guess that gave him some special expertise. Because now he had gone back into the library and looked at some of those old pictures of Adam, he wrote, "And as we stare into one another's eyes, a realization forms, an understanding. Adam's eyes seemed to ask for help. Adam Walsh became more than a story, and I had a whole new reason for telling it." Grayland hinted that the story of Adam's murder was just that, a story. That there have been cover-ups in the case and that he was going to be the guy to finally get to the bottom of them. Uh-oh. So this was a newspaper or 3-part series that was written by an editor, I guess. I never even heard of it. "Something has stopped efforts to really get this story from the beginning," one unnamed source said. "He reported that I had refused to talk to him, as if I had something to hide. Now you know what happened to the other reporters," said another source, who happened to be none other than Rex Conrad, the bottom-dwelling attorney from our Sears suit 12 years before. Conrad also said that he believed that Rebay had left Adam and Sears not for 10 or 15 minutes on the day he was abducted, but perhaps for as long as an hour and a half. You don't think they did settle? Okay. Yeah, I don't think so either. I think they just dropped it entirely, which makes me wonder why. Because it wasn't true? I don't know. It's fishy. Grayland reported that during a 2-hour interview with Dick Witt, the Hollywood police chief, Witt had told him that at the time of Adam's abduction, there was no reason to suspect a stranger abduction, and that now the probability, emphasis added, is that there is no John or Ray Walsh connection to the death of their son. All of that was hard enough to take, but in addition, the Mobile Press Register did something that I would not abide. They had also taken upon themselves to publish the location and a photograph of my family's house and yard, along with a description of my children's school. Hey, Teresa. Oh, no worries. You can just listen to my big mouth. My feeling was that if someone wants to hurt me for some reason, and they can go right ahead and try, they could do it to me personally, but they had no right to do it to my wife and children. I'd been getting death threats for years. I had bodyguards and security protection. I had lived with the sleazy innuendo that the press every now and then coughed up about Adam's murder. But I would not sit by silently when, to sell newspapers, they sent photographers out without my knowledge or permission to photograph my home, the place where my wife and children live. What in God's name did the newspaper hope to accomplish by doing such a thing? And you had to wonder what Jay Grayland thought was going to be in store for him once his opus had been seen by the world throughout the series. He kept mentioning the Pulitzer Prize. Hey, Benita. Hey, Alberta. You had surgery yesterday? I hope you're okay. Are you home or are you still stuck in the hospital? I asked Sherry to fax the articles to Mike Christensen, a trusted friend and attorney in Fort Lauderdale who had done a lot of pro bono work for the Adam Walsh Center and who had handled some legal things for me in the past. Ooh, gallbladder is gone. Just got home. Oof. That's got to be painful. I figured you would have been stuck there for a bit. Yeah. I don't know where these people were trying to message me. It must be Instagram because I haven't been on there in a long time, but I guess people were trying to get a hold of me. I'm okay. It's life happens, you know. I had to take a break. At that time, I was still keeping in touch every so often with the HPD about Adam's case, and now what I was hearing from them was that this Grayling guy was trying to write a book about Adam's murder that was probably going to talk about my connections with the mob and God knows what else. I wanted to know from Chris Jansen if there was anything that I could do to stop this kind of crap, but that would not be the worst of it. As it turned out, beginning in November of 1994, Grayland had been calling people up and trying to get them to talk about Adam's case. He went down to Hollywood, where one morning at 9 a.m., he placed a call requesting an interview to the office of the Hollywood police chief, Dick Witt. Much to Grayland's surprise, Witt's secretary came back to the phone after checking with the chief and asked if Grayland would be there in an hour. Grayland talked to Witt for 2 hours. Wow. And afterward called up Mark Smith, the HPD cold case detective. Grayland told Smith that Chief Witt had said that it was okay for Grayland to see the case file and all of it. Oh, wow. It was rough when you had yours removed too. It does get better each day. Good. I figured that would be one hell of a pain. Yeah, I'm back now. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next for another life. I'll think of something. I'm okay. I'm all right. Smith was incredulous. No one in their right mind, let alone a chief of police, would hand over the confidential case file on a still active homicide investigation. So after he hung up with Grayland, Smith immediately put in a call to Dick Witt and asked if that was true. No, said Witt. He had never said any such thing. Then a week before Grayland's first article appeared, the most frightening thing of all had happened. That was when the Mobile Press Register, that great champion of the First Amendment, went to court in Broward County to try to get his hands on Adams' case file. Oh shit, 3? Oh my god, you're a warrior, woman. I'd be just a bitchin'. Oh hell, wow. I'd be freaking. Yeah, true, Deb. It's not the same kind of pain. In the years since it happened, a lot of sickos had claimed to know something about Adam's murder. Some out of revenge, others in a twisted quest for glory. All I knew was what I had learned from my FBI contacts, that whoever had murdered Adam was a psychopath, and that it's usually hard to know whether these guys are telling the truth or completely fabricating it. I've seen enough in my FBI presentations with Wrestler to know that the normal Christian ethics don't apply here. Are you lying to me about how you killed that woman and stabbed her, sir? Was it really 147 times, or was it actually 192 times? No, the only way to tell for sure if what these guys are telling you is true is to back it up with some hard corroborating evidence. Oh, she got, yeah, that's right. She would be able to go with you too. That's awesome. If, for example, Adam's remains had been found next to the stump of a sawed-off maple tree and that was never publicized, and some lunatic came forward saying, I killed Adam Walsh and I left his remains next to a sawed-off maple tree, that confession would certainly have some weight. If the same fact had been published in all the newspapers, it would be virtually useless. Hearsay, public knowledge, something that a smart defense lawyer could come up with in the blink of an eye. Even I, as Adam's father, had no idea what was in the case file. I would want that case. Not want it, but at least look at it. Yeah, I bet the doctors and the nurses are probably all in their glory because you don't see that much, right? In a hospital, you don't get to have your pets there. So they're probably just loving it. Okay, Patty, you're listening. Ooh, you had attacks and you were told it was spinal pain from delivery. Wow. I also knew that cases based on suspect's confession are extremely tough to prosecute. The accused can suddenly claim in court that the cops beat him up to make him confess or that he's just decided to recant. Anyone in law enforcement knows that the way cases are made is by keeping certain sensitive information confidential. And all the legal experts were telling me the same thing. If the case files are opened up, John, you're screwed. On Monday, May 15th, 1995, a week after Grayland's first article appeared, I walked through the glass front door of the Hollywood Police Department for the first time in 14 years. I was there for a meeting that my lawyer, Mike Christiansen, had set up between me, Joe Matthews, my bodyguard, John Reed, the Hollywood Police Chief, Dick Witt, and an HPD officer named Paul Dunnigan. By that time, Joe Matthews and the HPD cold case detective Mark Smith had begun looking into the case again, and we knew what we would have to prove to keep it confidential, that this was still an active homicide investigation. Because as everyone knows, there's no statute of limitations on a homicide. The lawyer said that never in the history of this country had the media been allowed to look at the confidential case file in an unsolved capital murder case. I had already decided that now, this time, I wasn't going to take it anymore. I was no longer going to be the humble, non-participatory victim. Right off the bat, At the meeting, I said, I've supported the Hollywood Police Department for years. I've done everything they asked me to, and now I want to know what's going on. What exactly is the status of my son's case? By that time, I'd addressed the International Association of Chiefs of Police, been a consultant to the Justice Department, been catching serious, dangerous criminals on my show for 7 years. Oh, really? You'd rather give birth a million, literally the Bible. Yeah, hold on. I would give birth a million times in a row before ever dealing. Really? Oof. Hey, Heavenly Cow, how are you doing? It took them a year to figure out what was actually going on. Wow. That's awful. I'm glad you guys are fixed and stuff now, but that must have been torture. And now I wanted some justice for my son. I wasn't pounding the table, but I made myself completely clear. I said that we had heard that Graylin was planning a book, and I figured it would feature the famous John Walsh mob connection. I want to know what you're going to do about this, I said. I want you to tell the papers clearly and for the record that I have never had any associations with the mafia and that I've never had my legs broken, that I'm not a drug lord and don't have any drug-related associations. And who would know better than the Hollywood police that John Walsh and his family have nothing to hide. Nothing. At that meeting, Dick Witt, the Hollywood police chief, was asked point blank if there was any official suspicion that I was somehow affiliated with the mafia. We were all sitting there, expecting him to say how ridiculous even the idea of that was. Instead, what Witt said was, anyone who goes to, here he mentioned a well-known Fort Lauderdale restaurant, for lunch has something to do with the mafia. Hey, SD. Oh, no worries. Thanks for coming. I knew that Adam's murder had happened a long time before Dick Witt came on board, but now, if Graylin really was going to try to get the files, then the ones who would have to fight him off would be the Hollywood police. Technically, I had no legal standing in the motion. I, after all, was just the father of a victim. Dick Witt and the HPD would be the defendants, the ones in whose official interest it was to keep their case file sealed. So now, whether I liked it or not, the HPD was part of our team. Above all, I could not do anything to alienate them, no matter what they had or hadn't done. I didn't want them to completely turn their backs on Adam's case. I swear, I have to say Adam's case one more time. It's like every other sentence. I also believed that Mark Smith deserved a chance. He, after all, seemed to be making a lot more headway than anyone else had in 14 years. After the meeting, Mike Christiansen sent a memo to the Hollywood City Attorney Joel Cantor saying that I was thrilled and delighted that HPD is taking a strong and affirmative stance on this case. On May 18th, the Mobile Press Register made it official. They asked the court to enter an order allowing them to have immediate access to the HPD file on Adam's case. You can't do that on an open case. I really hope that didn't go through. Like, that's just insane. I get it, I get it. There's free speech and this and that, but this is going too far. I wouldn't even, no. It is horrid. When a reporter asked why he was pressing to open the file if Adam's family was opposed, Graylin stated, "The great irony in this is that I'm only doing what John Walsh has made a career out of doing." At the first hearing on June 12th, there was more bad news. The Sun Centennial in Fort Lauderdale was joining the Mobile Register as a plaintiff. The papers were going to invoke the Florida Sunshine Act. So now they were turning it into a free speech issue. I don't care if it's free speech. Even if it's still an active case, the press should not be allowed to have it. I mean, that's crazy. I agree, Brenda. Absolutely. Okay, you go to bed, and I hope you feel better. Oh, I bet. I will, Berta and Stella. You have a great night. Of course, this had nothing to do with them wanting to sell newspapers. At the hearing, Graylin admitted under oath that he had an interview with Dick Witt. but that Witt hadn't really told him much. No specific information about the case, just some generalities about how cold cases are worked. They never asked him if the interview went on for 2 hours. For our side, Mark Smith testified that Adams was a cold case and that no arrest warrants have been yet issued, but that Mark was working on 2 or 3 suspects. That was enough to make the court deny the paper's motion for immediate access to the records. Good. Because of the assignment of Smith to the case, it could be considered active, the judge, the Honorable Leroy H. Moe, concluded. But Moe wasn't going to let that ruling stand indefinitely. The Mobile Register's lawyer, Thomas R. Julin, said he'd wait a month or so to see if HPD made any headway, and if they didn't, he said he would resubmit the paper's request. That is just, I don't get it. Teresa's cooking right now. She's listening to us, but Teresa, Heavenly Cow's here asking about you. Yeah, she's in the kitchen cooking. At a press conference the next day, June 13th, the Hollywood city attorney, Joel Cantor, had to take a lot of heat. If this is an active case, the reporters asked, then what the hell have you people been doing for the last 14 years? What are your leads? What evidence do you have? What have you found out lately? They were asking some pretty probing questions, and Joel was doing his best to tread water. I wasn't at the first courtroom hearing, but I did a great job of sticking up for HPD afterward. I made a point of telling the press what a great job the cops were doing, but what I really wanted to get across to everyone was one simple thing, that I wasn't trying to keep the case file closed to hide some horrible dark secret. My wife and I, as I had always said, had nothing to hide. The only reason that we were fighting so hard against the press register was because we were trying to keep Adam's case from being lost. What? I don't think can't they just get photocopies of everything in there? Yeah, she's just in the kitchen. Oh, you're cooking too, Benita? Then on September 26, 1995, the other shoe dropped. The papers renewed their motion to open the file. This time, they were also joined by the Palm Beach Post and one of the really big guns, the Miami Herald. 3 weeks later, on October 18th, 1995, Judge Moe ordered the defendants, Chief Dick Witt and the Hollywood Police, to make all of the records on Adams' case available by noon on February 16th, 1996. Wow. This was bad, very bad, but not entirely unexpected. We were still a long way from giving up the ship. For a couple of months at first, things seemed to die down. Then just before Christmas of 95, while I was doing my first movie of the week out in California, I got a call from Mark Smith. He sounded a little nervous. John, I just got asked this question. I really don't have the answer, so I've got to check it with you. I'm assuming that they showed you these green shorts and the sandal back in 1984, didn't they? I was in the middle of a production meeting. I had no idea what he was talking about. What is it, Mark? What are you asking me? I could hear him let out a long breath on the other end of the line. I was afraid you were going to say that, John. Look, there's something I've got to tell you about. In 1984, they found a green pair of child's shorts and a yellow rubber flip-flop buried in Otis Toole's mother's backyard in Jacksonville. You're lying. John, I was hoping that someone had shown them to you and Rebe, or that you at least knew something about them. I started screaming. Showed us? We didn't even know they existed. How could anyone not have told us? Green short. I feel like I read this already. Oh, you're tired, eh? That's what Adam was wearing when he was taken. What if they're Adams? You mean they've just been sitting there all this time and no one could take 2 minutes out of their busy day to pick up the phone and let us know? With all the torture that we've gone through, how could anyone on the planet possibly be so incompetent? On the other end of the phone, Mark was dead silent. It wasn't his fault. He was just the messenger. He had only been working the case for the last year or so, and he was doing a lot better job than anyone else ever had. He was the one, after all, who had gone back into the evidence room and found these things. What I could not believe was that neither Jack Hoffman nor anyone else had shown me or even told me about this. I keep thinking, what if they're Adams? What if they're Adams? Mark said that after the holidays, we could come down and he would show us what he had found. On January 16th, 1996, we went back for another meeting at the Hollywood police station. We all got together beforehand at Mike Christiansen's law office in Lauderdale. Me, Rebe, my producer, Lance Heflin, my bodyguard, John Reed, and George Terwillinger, a Top Gun Washington lawyer and former deputy attorney general. George's special practice and expertise in law enforcement. Sherry Nolan knew him From her days as a senior policy official in the Justice Department, based on what he had already seen, George's take was that we better be prepared because the HPD had not done anything right on this case so far, and there was no reason to believe that they were going to do the right thing now. We sat in Mike's office for a while, discussing how we're going to handle things at the meeting, and then we left for the HPD in a caravan of cars. The whole way there, as we had for weeks, Ray and I were thinking about having to see those shorts. It was too much to consider. I waited until the last possible minute to tell her, yeah, I think I did read this. Shit. I've been reading old stuff. All right, well, there's a refresher. Anyways, those shorts and stuff were not Adam's. Oh my God. Okay, so this is where we left off. Wow. I was going to say, I thought I read this already. My bad. I haven't been here for a couple weeks. Okay. All right, so according to Steve Kendrick, who talked to him again some months later, Toole finally decided to clam up entirely. Toole told Kendrick that when they took him back to where he had disposed of the body, they had called him a son of a bitch and an asshole. And it finally made him mad. I wasn't going to tell them anything more, he said. I told them to just take me back home, and we weren't that far from where the body was at. Well, Otis, if you were that close, said Kendrick, then why'd you change your mind? It was, Toole replied, because of the way they treated me. Yeah, I kind of needed a refresher too. So now we're at the part where I think Otis had stated that he had unalived Adam, and then this is where he says, no, I didn't kill Adam Walsh. In May 1995, when the Mobile Press Register started trying to get its hands on the case file, the state attorney's office appointed its own investigator to re-examine the case. Phil Mundy, a top retired Fort Lauderdale detective with some 20 years' experience. Mundy and Mark Smith both looked into another allegation, the rumor that they had been swirling for years that Buddy Terry had fed information to Toole in hopes of lining up a book deal. It was a serious charge, one that, if true, could shed doubt on the whole investigation. Terry had certainly been smeared in the press about it, so Smith and Mundy checked with cops, investigators, and Terry himself, who, they were surprised to learn, had never officially been interviewed about the charges. Yeah, I haven't been on here either, Heavenly Cow, for like 2 weeks or more. I've been gone too. It's my first time back in a long time. Yeah, I figure it's probably a good idea. I did kind of refresh us because, yeah. What they found was that Buddy Terry was a good cop who, back in 1983, had basically been trying to help everyone out. Terry was the one who had led Hoffman and Hickman to Toole's white Cadillac. Terry was the one who had learned about Henry Lee Lucas's incarceration at the time of Adam's murder. It may have been fair to say that Buddy Terry had been a little overzealous. But it was clear that he had been wrongly accused, perhaps out of sheer jealousy on the part of other cops. There was not a shred of evidence to suggest that Buddy Terry had tainted the case. Which still left the question, why had Toole talked so freely? Was it bravado, stupidity? Did he just do it for the attention? Steve Kendrick once put it to Toole directly. Otis, why are you talking about all of this? The response was ugly, but perfectly in character, and maybe as close to the truth as it was possible to get. Toole was talking, he told Kendrick, because he had been given a court-appointed public defender, a black man who had told him in no uncertain terms to keep his mouth shut, who told him that the last thing he should be doing was shooting his mouth off to the cops. That had done it, Toole said, as he so delicately put it to Kendrick, no N-word lawyer's gonna tell me what to do. Wow, isn't he a friggin' peach? So that's why he said that he killed Adam, is because he had a black lawyer. And he didn't want the black lawyer telling him what to do. Wow. After the initial flurry of publicity surrounding his arrest, interest in Toole receded. By May of 1984, he was sentenced to the electric chair for the Jacksonville arson murder, had given statements in connection with 30 other killings, and was charged in 9. One courtroom observer remembers Toole's appearance. You know how you can tell a lot about a person by looking into their eyes, she says? Well, with Toole, when you looked in his eyes, all you saw was a blank page. At the trial, she says, even while prosecutors were saying all kinds of terrible things about him, Toole sat there the whole time with a stupid grin on his face, like, yep, I'm the one they're all talking about. They're talking about me. Back in 1983, I was as excited as anyone when the cops announced they were going to indict Toole and was disappointed when the case against him seemed to start falling apart. I never really understood why. I just figured that the cops knew what they were doing and were working the case as best they could. Sometimes Jack Hoffman would call with news of a tip, but I certainly knew that the cops weren't going to share sensitive, confidential details with me. That kind of thing might jeopardize the investigation, so I tried to keep on top of things as best I could without butting in. Oh, well, hopefully I can cheer you up. You've been in and out of, yeah. No, not John Walsh. Otis Toole did, the serial killer. He said he wasn't going to shut his mouth, and he started copying to Adam's murder because his lawyer, Otis's lawyer, was black, and he said he wasn't going to listen to an N-word lawyer on what he's supposed to do. He just wouldn't listen, so he made it up that he killed Adam. Like, what? You've been in and out of the hospital because you're, oh, wow. You're a hot mess. I'm sorry. I wish I could help. Hopefully I can make you laugh, though. Sometimes I couldn't help finding out about things, as when in 1988, Toole suddenly seemed to rear up again, sending me that horrible extortion letter. As it turned out, Toole had dictated the letter to a cellmate who could write, a guy named Jared Schaefer, a former state trooper who had been convicted for a series of rapes and murders. For a while there, the two had a little cottage industry going, writing letters all over the place, trying to extort money for alleged information. They were all the same, long on ghoulish detail, no hard proof. But most of what had happened I didn't find out about until much later, 1996. As a matter of fact, when the case file was opened up, such as the cell that had come in from a guy named William Carl Missler. On July 1st, 1991, Jack Hoffman got a call from Missler, who lived in Hollywood and had just seen an article in the Miami Herald about Madge J.B. Smith's retirement from the HPD, in which Smith talked about how thoroughly HPD had worked to eliminate Otis Toole as a suspect. Missler was under the impression, like everyone else, that Toole had been indicted long ago. On hearing that he hadn't been, Missler was appalled because, he told Hoffman, he had seen Toole abduct Adam in the parking lot that day. What? Here's another twist to the story. Hey, Autistic Show. Okay, so so Missler was trying to say that I guess he saw Otis Toole abduct Adam in the parking lot that day. Wow. Missler told the cop Hoffman that on the afternoon of July 27, 1981, he had been in the west parking lot of the Hollywood Mall and had seen a man matching Toole's description put a little boy into a white four-door Cadillac with a black top and then drive off. At the time, Missler didn't think much about it. The little boy hadn't seemed frightened, and the next day, he and his family had left on a camping trip. Not until they got back to Hollywood did they hear about Adam's abduction. Even then, it didn't occur to him that the two incidents might be related, because after all, the newspaper said there had been eyewitnesses, and the police had narrowed the search to a blue van. 2 years later, in 1983, Missler, like everyone else, saw the articles about Otis Toole's arrest. He recognized the man as the guy in the Cadillac that day. Other witnesses must have seen it too, because Toole had clearly been arrested and was being charged in that crime. Hoffman told Missler that he was going on a vacation and that he should call back in a couple of weeks. Hoffman didn't take down a phone number. 2 weeks later, Missler did call back. He agreed to a polygraph, which an HPD examiner called inconclusive, and consented to being hypnotized by someone from the Broward Sheriff's Office. Missler described the man he had seen as having reddish-brown hair, a 2-week-old beard, weird eyes, greenish teeth, a yellow-stained shirt, the same color of the manila envelope. It was that filthy, along with what looked like a morning cup of coffee right down the center. He described watching the man kneel down and talk to the child, take him by the hand and put him into the car. During an interview with Hoffman, Missler got upset when he started talking about how, if he had done something, he might have prevented Adam's murder. You were sick. That's what put you. I'm so sorry. Okay. I hope you did. You get my email back? I did send it to you when I got yours. I sent it you one right back. You're getting skinnier every day. I mean, that's good, but it's not. You know what I mean? Because Missler came forward on October 17th, 1991, Jack Hoffman, Bill Haggerty went up to re-interview Otis Toole at Stark. During that interview, Toole said that the only reason he had ever confessed was for personal gain, and that he had enjoyed being given food and cigarettes at the Indian River location. It is this detective's opinion, Hoffman wrote at the conclusion of his report, that Otis Toole was being truthful and sincere about his non-involvement in the Adam Walsh homicide. By this point in the review of the case file, Matthews and Smith knew some hard evidence was still needed. The most compelling kind, of course, would have been Adam's body. But it was never found. By the time the canal, the land along the turnpike, and even Toole's mother's backyard in Jacksonville were searched, 2 years had lapsed since the murder. It was now 14 years later. But some physical evidence was still left, as both detectives knew. One of Joe Matthews' first suggestions, in fact, was that every piece of existing evidence to be re-examined and compared to whatever appeared about it in the written case file. In doing just that, Smith knew where he had to start in the HPD's fourth floor evidence room, an interior office filled floor to ceiling with industrial metal shelving and boxes, bags, and envelopes of evidence from hundreds of burglaries, Rs, and murders. The Adam Walsh evidence took up an entire shelf of its own, and Smith started making his way through it. One of the first things that he found shocked him. There, in an envelope, was a yellow flip-flop and a pair of child's green shorts. Okay, I already read that. I just feel like I'm going back again. This time I got it right, too. Those were the items that would be shown to Reve and me at our meeting with the HPD in January of 96. Then, as now, there was no explanation for why they had never been shown to us before. The two items had turned up during an excavation of Toole's mother's backyard back in 83, after which Jack Hoffman had taken possession of them. This evidence was then brought back to the city of Hollywood, he wrote in the final line of his 143-page report, and placed into the evidence room, which is where it had sat unopened for nearly 12 years. Matthews had read the reports about Toole's black over white catalog and about how, when it was found, the car's interior and window locks were exactly as Toole had described them. Matthews also saw that the carpet samples had been taken from the car and had tested positive for blood back in October of 1983. The bloodstains were right where they should have been, and if Toole's story was to be believed, on the driver's side floor, both front and back. Finding those evidence reports was one of the most exciting moments of the entire search. Matthews knew what could be done now with DNA testing and hadn't been possible back in 1983. Now, the samples could be retested and compared with samples of Reve's and my DNA, which would be similar to Adam's. Any matchup with those blood samples would end all speculation once and for all. Except that, although Smith spent months trying to track down the carpet samples, there was no longer any sign of them. Wow. Anywhere, not at HPD and not up in Jacksonville, where they had been sent back in 1983 for tests. The samples had last been signed out of the FDLE's lab by someone with the initial J. Maybe a local cop named James Geisenberg. Maybe James Buddy Terry. Neither man recalled anything about it. And the bottom line, no matter what had happened, says Smith, is that it was an HPD case and it was our evidence. We were responsible for it, and why it sat there for 6 months without being picked up was not that person's fault. Like the carpet samples, the car itself was gone now. 2 last registered to a man in St. Augustine in 1985, who later had it towed to an unknown junkyard in Jacksonville. Why the hell would that car even be sold? It has blood in it from murders. It was Otis's car. That doesn't even make sense. Why would... So what, the police just sold it? Oh, I guess, yeah, they do sell off those cars. I forgot about that. That's where you can actually get cars for really cheap. I learned about that, actually, not too long ago. Never mind. That is a thing. Based on this information, it's believed that this vehicle is no longer accessible. Smith wrote in his report, any attempt to locate it for the previously mentioned test would be futile. As the press would later write it, a 2-ton piece of evidence had simply disappeared. Okay, apparently it disappeared too. After re-examining all the available remaining evidence, Matthews and Smith agreed that it was time to re-interview Toole, except that now Dick Witt, the HPD's police chief, suddenly declared the Toole interview was strictly an HPD matter. It was not Matthews, but an officer from the Juvenile Division, one of Matthews' polygraph students, who was completely unfamiliar with the case, who was ordered to accompany Smith up to the Union Correctional Institute at Stark on June 27, 1995. Despite his interviewing expertise and all the work that he had done on the case, Joe Matthews was edged out yet again. That's weird. They won't let him interview. I don't know if you guys remember, but Joe Matthews, he was the one who did the polygraph the first time with Toole, and he knows him, and Toole will open up to him, right? And this police chief does know that, but this is going to be the second time that they kick out. They don't want Joe Matthews to do the thing on him anymore, like do the polygraph on him, which is weird because the Otis O'Toole will talk to him, Joe Matthews. Yet they choose somebody else. I don't understand that. I feel like they're hiding something. My foot fell asleep. There we go. At 8:45 a.m. that morning, Toole was brought into an interview room next to the administration building from the medical facility where he was then being housed. Smith had been told that because Toole had active hepatitis B and C, everyone would have to wear surgical masks. Toole's abdomen was distended and he was tired, but he didn't seem feeble. He was coherent and could walk unaided. At first, he was soft-spoken and cooperative, at least until Smith told him why they were there. Then he suddenly became agitated, saying that he was not in any way involved in Adam's case or in any other case, even the ones he was convicted of. After 30 minutes of general conversation, he agreed to be tape recorded, but the interview went nowhere. Toward the close of the interview, Toole became tired and was returned to his ward in the medical unit. So that doesn't make sense. I don't know why they just wouldn't let the guy who already interviewed him many times back in there to do this investigation. It doesn't make sense to me. After nearly a year of investigation, this was the first time that Mark Smith had ever come face to face with Otis Toole. I wasn't really comfortable being in the same room with him, says Smith, and I don't mean because he had a contagious disease. Toole was interviewed again several times by Smith, but the response was always the same. Asked about Adam, he would shake his head and say, No, I didn't do it. People had forced him to say things, he insisted. By 1996, Toole, serving 5 life sentences in the Florida State Prison at Stark, was not in great shape. He was only 49 years old, but all the years of drinking, drugging, and God knows what else had taken a toll. Smith says that because he knew how desperate I was to get a dying declaration from Toole, which would stand up in court as a confession, he asked to be notified if Toole's condition worsened. But that's not what happened. When Toole was later transferred to a medical facility off prison grounds, someone must have dropped the ball. No one notified Mark when it happened. No one came. On September 15, 1996, Otis Toole died of hepatitis, cirrhosis, and, according to unconfirmed reports, AIDS at the North Federal Reception Center in Lake Butler. His body went unclaimed, so it was put into a grave at the Union Correctional Institute at Rayford. He left a Bible and a few personal effects, and I lost my chance for a deathbed confession. Holy. Wow. No, not John. It was Otis Toole. They were trying to anyways. Hey, Brett. Ooh, birthday party? Actually, my son's birthday is in 2 days. It's on the 11th. He's going to be 12. It's crazy. So Otis Toole died. They never got the samples. They lost the samples anyways, the carpet samples with the blood on it from Toole's car. So they're never going to know anyways. And they didn't get a confession because he died. After our America's Most Wanted segment on Toole aired on September 21st, the AMW hotline got a call from a woman who was angry because she assumed, mistakenly, that I had been officially notified of Otis Toole's death. No one had bothered to call her, she said, and after all, she was Toole's niece. My assistant, Sherry Nolan, asked Joe Matthews to call the woman back. He did and spoke to her for nearly 3 hours. She told him the whole sorry story of her childhood, how Toole had sold her as a prostitute when she was 13, and would watch while men came in to have sex with her. How does an uncle sell his fucking... What? How the hell does an uncle sell his 13-year-old niece? Where's the mother? Where's the parent? Oh my God. Happy birthday. Yeah, he's... I can't believe he's growing up too big. Matthews listened to her for a long time and finally decided there was no harm in asking. Did she believe that Otis was the killer of Adam Walsh? I have no doubt of it, she said evenly. I know my uncle too well. Matthews asked her how she could be so certain. It was, she said, because of what happened the last time she ever saw him. It was Christmas time of 1995, and she had gone to visit him at Rayford. Toole was obviously sick. His health was failing. She knew that she might never see him again, so she asked him directly, Uncle Otis, are you the one that killed Adam Walsh? Yeah, he said. I killed the little boy, and I always felt kind of bad about it, too. She began to ask how and why he could ever have done such a thing, but that was as far as she got, because Otis Toole said that he had already talked enough about the murder of Adam Walsh, and that now he didn't want to talk about it anymore. Oh my God, your oldest started driver's ed this month. Oh, wow. They just grow so fast. I've got a picture of my son beside me when he was a baby, and he's got this huge smile on his face. It's actually it's I don't even know what the hell you call this. It matched like my it's like a leather case that you like the one part matched that you put your remotes and coasters and stuff in, and then this part I got, it was a clock, but it opens up at the top, and so the clock is the front, and then the right side, left side, and the top of the lid has pictures in it of Leland. He's the baby. It's just so cute. I keep my stash of candy in there so he doesn't find it because it's good. 6th grade, he was shorter than me. Now he's 5. I know, mine's going to be taller than me too. He's in 6th grade. They're the ones I'm hiding on him. Well, I already bought him his box because they were on sale at Shoppers. Ferrero Rochers. So those. But I got the white ones, the coconut ones, and they're my favorite. So I both bought us one, and he ate his, and I still have mine. So I've got it hidden because I know he'll eat them all. These are my favorite. You're 5'4". I'm 5'3". Wow. After Toole's death, just one small ray of hope was left to me: the murder weapon. Over the years, police had taken into custody a total of 5 bladed instruments that they thought might have been used in the crime. Michael Monahan's sugarcane cutting knife, a machete found at the roofing company where Toole sometimes worked, a different machete taken from one of Toole's relatives, a third found in the trunk of Toole's Cadillac, and a bayonet taken from over a mantle at Toole's sister's house in Jacksonville. Jesus. I was just going to say that too, Brenda. Why the hell did she go there to visit him if he did that to her? That doesn't even make sense to me. Why would you, for what? To get your own peace of mind to see if he did kill Adam Walsh? I mean, even still, I wouldn't want to go there. It doesn't even make sense. I have a feeling though, Otis's family and like the whole, I don't know, like even his sister and stuff, I don't think they're all there. I hate to say it, but I don't think they're the brightest tools in the box. And I'm assuming his sister must be like that because his niece, for her to go and visit, that's insane. Back in 1983, blood had been found on at least one of those blades, but there was no way to tell whose it might be. Now, 15 years later, there was no material left to be tested, not even for DNA. Are you fucking kidding me? No carpet samples, no car. Now they don't have enough blood on this blade. It's all gone. There's not enough to be tested for DNA. That left a single remote possibility. Back in 1986, Matthews had worked on a case in the first in the country that had been solved using a new forensic technique. By comparing minute striations on a steak knife blade with corresponding markings on a victim's chest cartilage, scientists were able to prove conclusively that the knife was the murder weapon. And now, even though it took a full year to set up, Matthews arranged for a lab at the University of Florida in Gainesville to run the same kind of test on the bayonet and 4 machetes. I still don't understand how that would work. The 5 weapons were sent up to Gainesville along with Adams' remains. In May of 1997, the results came in. All 4 machetes were definitely ruled out, but the bayonet was a different story. The minute etchings on its blade were not inconsistent with markings to the bone. The lab could not call it a definite match, nor could they rule it out. Of course not. Wow. Because that's how it ended, right? Toole died, and then everybody, well, that's what they ended it with, that Otis Toole had murdered Adam Walsh. But it just says right here, they can't conclusively say it was, but they can't also say it's not. At first, the findings didn't seem to mean much. Over all the years, and in all the police reports, the murder weapon was always described as a machete. Always, that is, with just a few exceptions. A review of the record shows that in the first conversation with the Louisiana detectives, via Ann Cummings, way back in 1983, Toole said that he had used a machete or a bayonet. Yeah, so how can you just be okay with that? Exactly. A month later, as part of the investigation, Hoffman had interviewed one of Toole's acquaintances, a guy up in Jacksonville named Charles Lee Hardiman. At the time, Hardiman, who had sometimes worked with Toole, remembered that Toole sometimes carried a large knife. According to Hoffman's report of a sworn statement from Hardiman in November 1983, Mr. Hardiman indicated that the knife was approximately 18 inches long and would fit on the end of a rifle. This detective asked Mr. Hardiman if this knife would be that of a bayonet, and Mr. Hardiman indicated that it would be. Mr. Hardiman had knowledge of this bayonet due to the fact that he was one time the owner of this knife, and that he gave it to Otis to sharpen for him, and that Otis Toole never returned it to him. As to the time that Mr. Hardiman gave this bayonet to Otis Toole, he recalled that it was prior to May of 1981. And then there was the 1988 memo from Jack Hoffman to Dick Witt, a report outlining how 2 sergeants from the Broward Sheriff's Office had gone up to Rayford to interview a prisoner there. One, Jared J. Schaefer. Schaefer was the same guy who back then had sent out all those horrible extortion letters with Toole. In the words of Hoffman's report, Gerald Schaefer informed the 2 Broward sergeants that Otis Toole told him that he used a bayonet to commit the Walsh murder. He said that they would be able to find the bayonet hanging over the mantel at Toole's sister's house. The 2 cops went to interview the sister, Vinetta Cyphers? Vinetta. I have never heard a name like Vinetta. Okay. Vinetta Cyphers, who told them that she didn't know if her brother had killed Adam Walsh, but she was sure of one thing, that the bayonet had been hers. Hers? Jesus. So the bayonet had been hers since 1979, and in all those years it had never once left her house. If Otis had taken it, she would have known about it. The sergeants asked if they could take it for testing anyway, and she agreed. In 1996, Mark Smith decided to track down and re-interview Charles Hardiman. Smith showed him a photograph of the bayonet that had hung over Vinetta Cypher's mantel, and Hardiman immediately recognized it as his own. He had always wondered what happened to it, as a matter of fact. Because he had loaned it to Toole to sharpen, he said, and Toole had never given it back. The knife wouldn't be the kind you'd forget, Smith thought. It was full 1.5 feet long, fairly heavy, and not a typical bayonet. It wasn't a thin, narrow blade that slipped into the tip of the rifle barrel. This had a full wooden handle attached to it. It was actually more like a sword. Back in 1988, Hoffman hadn't seemed too excited about the recovery of that bayonet. In the very last line of his report, detailing how it was handed over by Vinetta Cyphers, he reiterated, in closing, that there's no evidence at this time to link Otis Toole to the Walsh murder. 9 years later, it suddenly looked as if the same bayonet could be the murder weapon. Now, of course, it could never be proven, but if this bayonet had been the murder weapon, what would account for the dozens of references in the case file to the searches for and descriptions of machetes? Well, there was no few about bayonets. Maybe the answer is contained in the transcript of Hoffman's very first interview with Toole in the Duval jail back in 1983. The record shows that during that interview, when Toole first described the murder weapon, he did refer to it as a bayonet. What kind of bayonet are we talking about? Hoffman asked. When you say bayonet, are you talking about bayonet is a big knife about like that, said Toole, indicating the length. You're saying almost 18 inches long. Yeah. Somewhere like a machete, he says? Yeah, said Toole, like a machete. While Joe Matthews and Mark Smith were working their end of things, the state attorney's investigator, Phil Mundy, was doing his thing too. For starters, he re-interviewed Steve Kendrick, the first person Toole ever mentioned Adam's murder to. One of the things that Mundy asked him was that Toole said he used to lure Adam. He said he used to lure Adam into the car. As Mundy knew almost every reference to it in the case file, Bagley mentions candy and toys, but that's not the way Kendrick remembers it. According to him, the very first time Toole ever mentioned it, he said what he had actually offered the little boy was a small handheld video game, something like a Game Boy. Mundy also saw that no hard information in the case file indicated that Toole might actually have been inside the mall that day, let alone Sears. But Mundy noticed that in Hoffman's very first interview with him, Toole did mention going into the mall and spending some time looking at wigs in a wig store. What? Toole's fixation on some wigs seemed almost comical, given his own thinning hair and the round bald spot that had been clearly visible on the back of his head. Mundy knew that there was no wig store at the Hollywood Mall, at least not anymore, but he located an old crisscross phone directory from 1981 and found under the street address for the mall a listing for a wig shop, right along with the one for Sears Roebuck. This is insane. Like it keeps pointing towards Toole, even though he's dead, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, okay, no. Then it's Toole, then it's okay, no. So I think this is when we finally finish this. I don't know what the hell the answer is. But even that was not the most compelling information Mundy would find. That wouldn't. No, don't do that. Okay, you're making my feet fall asleep, girl. Oh, there. It's okay. Oh, sorry. There, let's do this. Oh, that's so much better. You were killing me, girl. Like my foot's asleep. My cat. Claire, of course, hustling on me. Much better. All right. But even that was not the most compelling information Mundy would find. That wouldn't come until the fall of 1996, not long after America's Most Wanted segment on Adam's case aired. That was when a woman in Central Florida called the Hollywood police and said that she had some information about the case of Adam Walsh. It's weird how they're all coming out later in the game, eh? I mean, this happened in 81, and it seems like 95, 96, and I'm assuming not yet, and 97. That's when all the answers or supposed answers are coming out, or people coming forward and stuff. It's weird. And then that cop, Dick Witt, he was the chief of police for the Hollywood Police Department, and he said that anybody who goes to a certain restaurant is in the mafia, and John Walsh went to that restaurant. So he basically told everybody that he was in the mafia, and that's where the rumor started. I will only give her name as Mary H. She is 76 years old. She lives in a quiet retirement community, but I'm not going to be the one responsible for having the press descend on her. It was not easy for her to come forward after all these years. I know what the press is capable of, and I'm not going to be the one to throw her to the wolves. All right, John. On an afternoon in February 1997, Mary answered the door of her spotless second-floor apartment wearing a navy blue skirt and a white blouse with a Peter Pan collar. What's a Peter Pan collar? She was a little nervous at having visitors, but cordial and cooperative. Back in 1981, she was working as a waitress and living in Hollywood with her husband Lou on a street not far from ours. In fact, she says she knew who Adam was. Another little boy she knew from the neighborhood, whose name she still remembers as Scott, had pointed him out several times in the neighborhood. Around noon on the afternoon of Monday, July 27th, Mary went over to Sears because she said I had seen in the paper that they were having a lamp sale. On Saturday, she had bought the table lamp that still sits next to her chair. She had decided on the following Monday to go back and get another one. She remembered the New York bake shop that was in the mall and the wigs that were in the corner on stands. But maybe that was in Woolworths. She's not sure. She never really paid much attention to wigs because she always had a lot of hair. Not many people were in Sears that day, Mary remembers. On her way to the store, she passed the garden section, where she had earlier bought some tulip bulbs and was heading back to lamps when, in the middle of the toy aisle, she saw what looked like a television monitor. It was new, kind of, and I think it was only for games, she had said. Three children were at the computer, along with one who was younger and standing off to the side about 3 feet away. One kid was operating the game, the others were watching. Two of the kids were kneeling on the floor. The younger boy was about the same age as Mary's little boy, neighbor boy, who at the time was about 6 years old. Mary couldn't quite get past the group, though, because as she tried to pass, they were standing in the middle of the aisle. That was when she noticed a man standing with them, talking to the little boy she recognized as Adam. She stopped until the man stepped back, allowing her to pass, and, in the meantime, got a good look at him. He didn't look like somebody that a little child would be talking to, or who'd be working in the store, she said. He was sunburned, and he looked kind of shady. The man's skin tone was real brown, like somebody that lived outside, and she couldn't hear what he was saying because he was mumbling. Finally, he looked at her, grinned, and moved to the side. And when he grinned, the one thing I noticed was that he had big round freckles across his face, and he had a big gap in the front upper teeth. His hair was shiny and laid real close to his head. It looked thin to her and a little fuzzy at first, until after she passed him, when she turned around and noticed that he was bald in the back, not on top like most people, she had said. It was on the back of his head, and it was kind of a round spot. Like that, so this Mary person, that depicts everything to a T of what he looked like. I can't see a 70 some woman calling the cops in 1997 saying, "Oh, by the way, I remember this," or this, I don't know. Everything points to Tool, you know what I mean? But this whole book is a huge head case. Mary says that she had no trouble remembering the man. She had passed by him close enough to touch and had watched him from only 7 or 8 feet away. Besides, she says, it was easy to remember how he looked because I never saw anybody who looked like him. Mary tends to pride herself on her recollection of detail. She seems unsure of exactly what he wore. A red shirt, blue pants with some kind of paint on them, white, really heavy looking spots all down the front of them, actually like paint or caulking, dirty sandals of some kind. She can't quite remember his hands, so he must have had them in his pockets or else was wearing long sleeves. He wasn't holding them up talking, not like my husband Lou, she says, who's Italian, and you're liable to get hit when he's talking. One thing she did remember clearly about the man, the way he smelled. He smelled terrible, like beer and onions. This is too specific. You know? Oh, beer and onions, eh? Oh, I'm sorry that you're sick. Happy 2023. I hope it. Yeah, happy 2023 to you, right? I do hope it gets better. The way he smelled was terrible, like beer and onions, overpowering something she could smell even from a few feet away. The man was talking in a low tone to the little boy, the one who was standing off to the side, and the little boy was looking up at him. The guy wasn't tall, but he stood with his shoulders hunched up. The little boy never turned his head toward Mary. He never took his eyes off the guy. Whatever he was doing to hold his attention, she said, this guy really had the child's interest. The little boy, slim, with a thinnish face, was wearing a cap. A little big on him, she remembers, because he had it pushed back on his head. It had a long bill, or maybe it just looked that way because his face was so small. But anyway, the child definitely had his head back. He was looking straight up into the man's face. The little boy had on shorts, which Mary thinks could have been blue, but maybe she said she is wrong. What she most remembered is how the three older kids were all dressed alike in everyday clothes, but this child was clean looking, clean and neat. And he looked as if he didn't stay in the sun. He was pale looking, at least compared to the man, whose skin was dark. The little boy had on flip-flops, what Mary called sand shoes. They're not shoes exactly, she said. You wear them at the beach. Rubber, spongy looking shoes that were just a little big on him, she noticed. I remember that. They were kind of large, she says, or maybe his narrow feet just made them look that way. His toe went through a strap in the front, the way she thinks that all the kids were wearing them. After Mary passed the toy section, she went into the lamp department where she saw only one other woman, a customer who seemed to be waiting for something. The woman was slim, with light straight hair parted down the middle, probably in her 30s. Mary looked around for a bit and didn't see anything she liked and went back out. Is there any videos of John Walsh from back in the day? Oh, probably. I did show one. I did show a couple clips. I'm sure I can rustle some up for next time. I'm just going to read a little bit more of this and then I'll stop. By that time, when she got back to the video game, no one was in sight. All the children and that man, she said. Everyone was gone. There was nobody in the aisle. There was nobody at the computer. She wanted to take a look at it herself, but someone had turned it off, and she wasn't sure how to turn it back on. Mary said that she hardly ever watches TV, so later that day it was her neighbors who told her that a little boy named Adam Walsh had gone missing over at Sears. I said, well, I'm sure I saw him in the store. He was talking to somebody, but I didn't know him. At the time, Lou, Mary's husband, was away for a few weeks on vacation. She was at home by herself and got the impression that others must have seen the guy too because the police seemed to have some idea of who had taken Adam. Then, after Mary's husband got home, he took her on a car trip to Washington, D.C. for a few days. On the way back on the turnpike, they saw a blue van. They had heard all about a blue van on the news, and Lou even tried to chase it for a while. It was all pretty frightening. And then when they got home came the news that terrified her even more. The police had found Adam's head up near Vero Beach. I was afraid to go out, she remembered. I didn't know if the guys who had done it were caught or anything. I knew the guy had seen me, and I didn't know that he didn't live around here somewhere. Yeah, isn't this quite detailed, Brenda? I mean, this is weird. A 70-some-odd woman, a 70-something woman is relaying all this from 1981. Because she had a hard time speaking to people sometimes, for a time she wrote all of her recollections down on paper. She let Lou read what she had written so he felt like he was there. She intended to give her notes to the police, but Lou said, why don't you leave it alone? The policemen will do their job. And so, when she moved out of Hollywood some years back, she just threw all those papers away. Over the years, she never forgot about what had happened that day. And then she saw the man's picture again. He was older, but he still looked the same, and it got her pretty upset. I said, my God, you mean he's still living and they didn't get him? Not long after that, she sat down and wrote a letter. It was hard for her to do, but she felt that she should have done it long ago. She tried to offer an apology. When the policeman first came to interview her, she picked up the guy's picture out of a lineup. Mary knew that she probably should have come forward sooner, but she didn't know any detectives had never met any policemen. She's the kind of person who would never had any reason to. And there was a day right after Adam was found that she and Lou did go over to Hollywood Police Station. I was going to tell them about seeing this man, she said, but there were so many people over there, so many telling things that were no help, and the police had other jobs to do. Wow. One policeman was outside at a bench, and all kinds of people were waiting in line to talk to him. The police looked at a little annoyed, she said, and didn't act as if he believed anything. Or maybe he was tired. I decided not to tell it, she said, looking down at the floor. I guess I just chickened out. Wow. That's the end of her A Crispy Treat. That was the end of this older lady. Then it goes back to John. We fought so hard to keep that case file closed. We thought that if we unsealed, it would take away all our hope. And it did, but for a reason different from the one we thought. We believed that it would forever destroy whatever evidence could still be used to prove who killed our son. Instead, it showed what a disaster the investigation was right from the start. How filled with laziness, stupidity, and arrogance. It showed that there had never been a chance of convicting Adam's killer, not from day one. At the beginning, the Hollywood police wanted it to be Jimmy Campbell. If it had been, it would have been made for one great headline. Wife's lover killed Adam. There was just one problem with that theory. It wasn't true, and that marked the beginning of a bad situation for all of us. Once Campbell and the rest of us passed those polygraphs, the cops should have bored down. They should have said there's the possibility of a stranger abduction here, even if they were 100% sure that the family was involved. In those critical first days, they should have been more willing to focus on other things too. They should still have run a parallel search. 2 years later, when Toole confessed, instead of regarding him as the most logical suspect, the Hollywood police basically ruled him out. I've watched hundreds of interviews with guys like that. The weirdest things come into their minds. Through a drunken haze, they remember some horrible detail of a crime, or how they slept with some guy, or ate some particular kind of food. They couldn't care less about who, what, and where. If you're a habitual serial killer who's planning to turn a trick or score some drugs, chances are you won't be able to look that date up in your Filofax later and say, oh yes, Tuesday the 21st, let's see. Yes, I was home watching Friends at 9 o'clock. That is not the world that Otis Toole and Henry Lee Lucas lived in. These guys are nomadic, opportunistic predators who live from one moment to the next. That's what the average citizen and maybe these investigators could not grasp. Supposing they asked Toole what he was doing during a 3-month period 2 years ago, and his answer was, well, I was in Tampa for about a week. Do you know what about a week is to a guy like Toole? 10 days to a month. So what do I believe happened? This. Okay, so this is what John believed happened. I was going to stop reading, but I kind of can't. All right. So what do I believe happened is this. That on July 23rd, 1981, Otis Toole goes to Riverside Hospital in Newport News, Virginia, complaining of depression. His longest stretch of employment has been for 4 or 5 years, on and off, at a roofing company. His mother, with whom we can assume he has had one swell relationship, has just died 8 weeks ago. Before that, he had been in the company of a psycho named Henry Lee Lucas, whom he just adores. Then Lucas gets his ass thrown in jail, leaving Toole to fend for himself. On his own, he has been in New York City, Texas, and Arkansas, hitchhiking all the way, sleeping outside and in vacant buildings. The hospital report describes him as disheveled and dirty. He's drinking a half pint of whiskey and several six-packs per night, along with God knows which bizarre street traffic drugs. He goes to the Salvation Army, where he gets a handout of $71.93 for a bus trip back down to Jacksonville. Oh, he fell asleep. Is there any videos on YouTube of him back when all this happened? Yeah, I did show a couple of them already, but I'll do it again next time on Monday, because then we'll be done this book, I'm quite sure. He is aimless, weird, and angry, unable to form normal human attachments. And he has no money, but he knows how to get some. He can turn a few tricks down in Miami, where they pay pretty good. In the meantime, Toole can live in a car, park it at the edge of one of those malls, who's going to know? And while he's down there around Lauderdale, somewhere in his sick brain, he decides to get himself a new traveling companion, a pet, a little kid. He knows how to do that too. You go to the Kmart and get yourself a shopping cart. It doesn't work with that little girl, though. She had too much of a mouth on her. But 2 days later, well, how about Sears? Same deal. You wander around, head over to the toy department. Some of the kids are causing a ruckus, yelling, shoving, but not the little boy, younger than the others, standing over to the side by himself. A few minutes later, outside the store, you see him again, without his mother, and a little scared. But now, you're not a stranger anymore. He remembers you from inside the store, and you tell him you have a new video game over at your house around the corner. Why not even 3 blocks away? 4 power windows with a control on the driver's side. He was so quiet and respectful, delicate almost. Why did he have to start hollering like that? It was all over relatively quick, within the day, within hours, within 120 miles. It was not drawn out, and my little boy did not have to live for days or weeks that way. But however it was not so fast that he didn't know what was happening to him. However it went, it was not easy for Adam. That's how John Walsh sees it. You said you haven't been home yet. I'm actually kind of hungry again. Okay, so that was what John Walsh said. He thought Otis Toole was thinking when he abducted Adam. And then the rest of this book is going to be all basically the same. Why Otis Toole was not ever convicted, and I'm assuming a couple other things. But we're almost done it, so I'll read the rest of this on Monday, and then I'll show you guys some clips and stuff. On his daughter, oh my God, she's damn. Megan is on a mission, man. She's not letting her parents get away with anything. You should see her over on Twitter. She posts every day, all day, about the corruption in the police department, the corruption with her parents, the cover-ups, the selling of children, child trafficking. Oh yeah, it's every day, all day. She will not stop until she's heard. Did Toole kill children? He claimed he killed Adam Walsh and then he took it back. But no, I don't think that he didn't. No, I don't think he did. But he did have. You don't have Twitter? Okay, I'll put some stuff on here. Here, I'll write it down because I will forget. Let me see here. So I'll get some John Walsh videos. So I'll do that. What I'll do is I'll just take you guys to Twitter with me. How was he able to do what he did? I don't know. It's what really freaks me out is that the cop even said that. Sorry, it wasn't even a cop. It was the chief of the Hollywood Police Department said that because John Walsh ate at a certain restaurant, he was in the mafia. Okay, I will definitely. Has Megan said why her children were taken? It's because that, yeah, she says that because her father has power, and because he's a big head honcho. Um, Not only that, he can he does have power. He's got connections. You know what I mean? So he can do whatever the hell he wants. So he took her kids to punish her because she's yapping about Adam. You've been trying to find, but haven't found super hard. Yeah, I'll definitely show some stuff on Monday, and I think that's when we'll be finished this book. So I don't know. I really want to read Jack the Ripper. It's a book that I have, but I've got so many. If I put a list out there of all the true crime books I have, oh my God, you guys will probably think I'm nuts. I have a little library. I love reading. It's like my favorite thing. So for people who don't have Twitter, okay, I have Twitter. You can go live on Twitter. Well, I can, and I've done it 3 times now. And what I've been doing is reading fairy tales. These fairy tales that are supposed to be for children, okay? So I bought this for my son when he was a baby. And when I started to read some of them, I realized these are horrendous. These are terrifying and funny as hell. So no, they weren't something you can read to a child, trust me. Their version of, what was it, Aladdin and the mermaid and all that stuff, hell no, you can't read that to your child. So that's what I've been doing over on Twitter when I go live, is I'll read a couple fairy tales and laugh my ass off. But I'm thinking I'm going to read some over here after we do something like this. That way we get in a better mood and just start laughing. You like grim stories? Yeah. So we can just start kind of laughing after we do something, after I read something like this, or we watch something this bad. That way we can not have nightmares or get in a better mood. You know what I mean? I need something like that after, so I might as well do it with you guys. So I'm going to read, I don't know, whatever's next. What's next? Okay, yeah. So I haven't read any of these. So this one's called The Master and His Pupil. And this is English fairy tales. Okay, so the last ones I read, there was, what was it? I think Gaelic, and the other one was Russian. It was crazy. So I'm just going to read this one, then Get us all in a better mood. All right, so this one's titled The Master and His People. There was once a very lean man in the North Country who knew all the languages under the sun, and who was acquainted with all mysteries of creation. He had one big book bound in black leather and clasped with an iron, and chained to a table that was made fast to the floor. When he read out of the book, he unlocked it with an iron key, and none but he read from it, for it contained all the secrets of the spirit world. It told how many angels there was in heaven, and how they marched in their ranks, and sang in their choirs, and what their names and jobs were, and it told of the demons, how many there were, and what their names and powers were, and how they might be summoned and made to do people's bidding. Nice. Hi, Brian. Yeah, these are usually pretty funny, Benita. I was just laughing yesterday. The Snow Queen was, oh my god. All right. Now the master had a pupil, who was but a foolish lad. He acted as a servant and was never allowed to look into the black book, or hardly to enter the private room. One day the master was out, and the lad, as curious as could be, hurried to the magical chamber. He gazed at his master's wondrous apparatus for changing copper into gold and lead into silver, and the mirror in which his master could see all that was passing in the world, and the shell that whispered to his master what people were saying at that very moment. But the lad realized he could do nothing with these things. I don't know the right words to utter, he sighed. They are locked up in the big black book. He looked round and saw the book was unfastened. Oh boy. The master had forgotten to lock it. The boy rushed to it and opened up the book. It was written with red and black ink, and much of it he could not understand. But he put his finger on a line and spelled it through. At once the room was darkened and the house trembled. A clap of thunder rolled through the passage and the old room, and there stood before him a horrible, horrible form, breathing fire, with eyes like burning lamps. It was the demon Beelzebub, whom he had called up to serve him. Be something I would do. Oops. Set me a task, bellowed Beelzebub, with a voice like the roaring of an iron furnace. The boy only trembled, and his hair stood up. Set me a task, or I shall strangle you. You can't read this. No, you can't read these to kids. So set me a task, or I'll strangle you. But the lad could not speak. Then the evil spirit stepped towards him, and putting forth his hands, touched his throat. The fingers burned his flesh. Set me a task. Hey, CJ. Water that flower over there, cried the boy in despair, pointing to a geranium that stood in a pot on the floor. Instantly, the spirit left the room, but in another instant, he returned with a barrel on his back and poured its contents over the flower. And again, he went and came and poured more and more water, till it was ankle deep on the floor of the room. Enough, gasped the lad, but the demon heeded him not. The lad didn't know the words by which to send him away, and still he fetched water. It rose to the boy's knees, and still more water was poured. It mounted to his wrist, and Beelzebub still kept on bringing barrels full. It rose to his armpits, and he scrambled to the tabletop. Now the water in the room stood up to the window and washed against the glass, and swirled around his feet on the table. It still rose. It reached his breast. What a moron! Get out of the friggin' house, then! In vain he cried. The evil spirit would not be dismissed, and to this day he would have been pouring water and would have drowned all the world. But the master remembered on his journey that he had not locked his book, and therefore returned. At the moment when the water was bubbling about the pupil's chin, he rushed into the room and spoke the words that cast Beelzebub back into his fiery home. Oh my god. Where's this one? Okay, this one's called The Mandarin and the Butterfly. Hopefully it's not too long. Let me see. Okay, yeah, that's a little bit too long. Oh, that's so sweet. All right, I'm gonna read this one. Okay, so this one is an Indian fairy tale, and it's called The Demon with the Mad Hair. Once upon a time, when the king of Benares, his chief queen, gave birth to a son who was actually a holy being called the Bodhisattva. On the baby's name, on the baby's name day, the king asked 800 wise men called Brahmins about his lucky marks. The Brahmins replied, "Full of goodness, great king is your son, and when you die, he will become king. He shall be famous and renowned for his skill with the 5 weapons, and shall be the chief man in all India." On hearing what the Brahmins had to say, the king and queen gave their son the name of Prince of the 5 weapons: sword, spear, bow, club, and shield. The king grew up tall and strong, wise and good. And the kid grew up tall and strong, wise and good. And when he was 16 years old, the king said to him, "My son, you must go and complete your education." "Who shall be my teacher?" the lad asked. "Go, my son, in the kingdom of Kandahar, in the city of, I can't even pronounce that. It's a far famed teacher from whom I wish you to learn. Take this and give it to him for a fee." With that, the king gave his son 1,000 pieces of money and dismissed him. The lad departed and was educated by his teacher, receiving the 5 weapons from him as a gift. When the studies were complete, the lad bade his teacher farewell and began his journey back to Benares, armed with the 5 weapons. On his way, he came to a forest inhabited by the demon with the matted hair. He was entering the forest. Some men saw him and cried out, "Hello, young sir, keep clear of that woods. There's a demon in it called He of the Matted Hair. He kills every man he sees." And they tried to stop him, but the lad, having confidence in himself, went straight on, fearless as a lion. He'd rather have the money. When he reached mid-forest, the demon showed itself. It made itself as tall as a palm tree. Its head was the size of a pagoda, its eyes as big as saucers, and it had 2 tusks. It had the face of a hawk, a striped belly, and blue hands and feet. "Where are you going?" it shouted. "Stop, you'll make a meal for me." The lad said, "Demon, beware." With this, he fitted to his bow an arrow dipped in deadly poison and let it fly. The arrow stuck fast in the demon's hair. Then he shot and shot till he had shot away 50 arrows, and they all stuck in the demon's hair. The demon snapped them all off short and then threw them down at its feet. Then it came up to the lad, who drew his sword and struck the demon, threatening him the while. His sword stuck in the demon's hair. The lad struck him with his spear. That stuck too. He struck him with his club, and that stuck too. "You demon," the lad cried, "did you never hear of me before, the prince of the 5 weapons? This day will I pound you to ponder." And he hit at the demon with his right hand. It stuck fast in its hair. He hit it with his left hand, and that stuck too. Then with his left, and that stuck too. Then he butted at the demon with his head, crying, "I'll grind you to dust," and his head got stuck fast like the rest. Though the lad was 5 times snared, caught fast in 5 places, yet he felt no fear, and he was not even nervous. The demon thought to itself, "Here's a line of a man, a noble man. Here he is, caught by a demon like me, yet he will not fear me a bit. Since I have ravaged this road, I never saw such a man." The demon asked, "Why is it, young sir, that you are not at all frightened of me?" "Why should I fear a demon?" the lad replied. "In one life a man can die but once. Besides, in my belly is a thunderbolt. If you eat me, you will never be able to digest it. This will tear your innards into little bits and kill you, so we shall both die. This is why I fear nothing." The lad meant the weapon of knowledge that he had within him. When it heard this, the demon thought, "This young man speaks the truth. A piece of the flesh of such a lion man as he would be too much for me to digest. If it were no bigger than a kidney bean, I'll let him go." So being frightened to death, I'll let go of the lad, saying, "Young sir, I will not eat you up. I set you free." And the lad said, "Demon, I will go as you say. You were born a demon, devourer of the flesh and gore of others. because you did wicked things in former lives. And if you go on doing wicked things, you will go from darkness to darkness. Then he told the demon about the punishments that awaited evil creatures and the rewards that awaited good beings. The demon bowed before the gods to change his ways. Then the prince went on to Benares, armed with his 5 weapons, and became a king who ruled long and righteously. Oh my god, these stories are something else. All right, I'm done reading for the night. Oh, I'd love some help with these things. Keep the money and no need for special. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with me. I don't know. I need Thursday. It's usually book day, right? I don't know. Jack the Ripper is really, really like a huge book that I have, but I have so many. Maybe I should just like, I don't know, turn my camera on one time and just show you my book collection. You guys can pick. How are you sitting on that? Oh, Missy. She is doing really good now. Well, except for she won't eat treats. It took her a long time to eat. So she eats wet food. She does drink water. Um, I don't I don't know. She tries to eat her hard food, but to even eat her treats, like the Whiskas Temptation, she won't eat them. She just snubs her nose at it. And that's weird because Claire's the treat queen. Doesn't look like she's losing too much or lost too much weight, but she was really, really sick. Really sick. I thought I lost her. I would have if I didn't figure out what was wrong. I had given her a new can of food and they never had it before. All the other animals were fine, but her, she wasn't. She's got a very sensitive stomach. And I gave her a little tiny bit of it and I shouldn't have. So yeah, she's doing better. And she's eating, just not treats. So I don't know, maybe it's a blessing in disguise for her not eating treats because she is kind of fat. I told them Brussels sprouts were trees and they need to eat them because I chopped a tree down just for them. Okay. I hate Brussels sprouts. Oh, they're just such a weird taste. Ugh. My mom loves them, so of course she would make them. I'm sorry, that's one thing I can't eat is Brussels sprouts. Because she just put like butter and a little bit of salt on them and it still had that taste, you know? That's like cantaloupe. I can't eat that or honeydew melon because when I was younger I got sick off of it. Now I can't eat it. Even the smell just ugh. I love watermelon though, but that's not even close to what that is. All right, I'm gonna shut get off here. I will be back again. I just don't know when. I need to set up a schedule for the rest of this week, I think. Yeah, she likes soft or hard treats. She eats the hard treats, so I'm gonna have to get her soft, I think. That's what I'm wondering, but how the hell did she get teeth issues all of a sudden? I don't know. Because she will eat her soft food, and she does try to eat her hard food. Maybe she just, maybe it's just these treats. I don't know. I really don't. I'll figure it out. And yeah, I've given her tuna as well. She likes that. But I'm running out. I got like 1 can left. All right, I'm gonna go off here. Yeah, I thought broccoli was part of trees too. Thanks for joining me, guys. I hope you had a good time. Anyways, I'll be back this week sometime. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Have a good night. Bye.